Thank you, and thank you very much for inviting me to this very important seminar. Having heard the discussion this morning already, I think we are discussing a lot about similar issues in Finland as you are here in Latvia. Of course, the political situation and EU regulations are very similar for both countries. First, I would like to just spend a few minutes on telling you why us in WWF, which we are an environmental organization, so why we are talking about energy efficiency and why we think it's very important. I was just told that I have 15 minutes for speaking and so to leave 10 minutes for your questions, so I will try to shorten my presentation a bit, but tell you the most important bits. I don't know if you're aware, but the IPCC, the International Panel of Climate Change, is just releasing their 5th assessment report this year, and the conclusions of the report will be published on November. But the scientific parts have already been published. You can find them from the IPCC webpage. And they show that until now, the temperature has risen about 0.85 Celsius decrease. And last year, 2013, was the 6th warmest year in the recorded history. Here you can find all this from IPCC website, but this is just more accurate history of the warming. And why is this climate change happening? Most of it is because of fossil fuel utilization in energy production. So this is why, of course, energy sector becomes relevant when we are talking about climate change. There has been a leak of the synthesis report, so the conclusions of the 5th assessment report of IPCC, and it has been leaked to international media, so we already kind of know what IPCC is going to tell us this November, and it looks very scary. With business as usual, so if we are going forward as a global community with the policies we already have implemented, but not going to strengthen them, by mid-century, so by 2050, the temperature will increase another 2 Celsius degrees. So in total, by 2050, almost 3 degrees warmer globe. And if we still don't strengthen our policies by the end of the century, so 2100, temperatures will be about 3.7 degrees warmer than currently. So it's 4.5 degrees in total. So that's a disastrous pathway. We don't want to go there. And what does IPCC then say about this? They say that humans now risk causing irreversible and widespread damage to the planet unless there is faster action to limit fossil fuel emissions. So it's very clear to say that climate crisis calls for rapid global energy system transformation, and energy efficiency, as said here already many times this morning, plays a very vital role in this. So this is why we at WWF are working with energy efficiency. I think there are a lot of other benefits than climate benefits also from energy efficiency, but this is of course why we are working on it. This fall is also very important in energy policy discussions in the EU level, since in about 1 month, 24th of next month, the EU Council will decide what kind of package will be chosen for 2030 EU climate and energy policy. So we are now talking about EU Energy Efficiency Directive, and this is part of the 2020 package, but now we're talking how should we proceed when going to 2030. And one big discussion is, should energy efficiency play a role in that, like energy efficiency is playing now a role in 2020 package, should it be continued towards 2030? And I have to be honest, I don't know what is the Latvian position on this, but maybe you know more deeper about your political discussion on this, and I think this is something that is very, very important in the upcoming months to discuss in each EU member state what is the position, what could energy efficiency targets for 2030, what kind of gains could different member states get from that. And of course, since building sector is a huge energy consumer, it will be the first to benefit. Okay, but then I will tell you more about the Finnish case, which I was asked to talk here this morning. And I would be very happy to talk to you about Finland as a perfect country in energy efficiency regulations and policies, but unfortunately that's not the case. We have a lot to improve, we have a lot to be learned from other countries and other policies. However, where we are very good is coming up with new clean tech innovations. So Finland is one of the best countries in the world in engineering, in coming up with engineering innovations, such as in IT and energy engineering sectors. But we have a problem. We are not good in commercializing them. There is not one other country in the world that comes up with as many clean tech innovations as Finland, but we are one of the worst ones to commercialize them. So even though we have a lot of clean tech innovations and clean tech is becoming one of the biggest export sectors in Finland, we're still not very good in commercializing the new innovations. And since energy efficiency is the main sector within the clean tech sector, this is a big discussion in Finland also due to our export revenues from the sector. And I could say that energy efficiency is a very good example of very good innovation possibilities, innovations in Finland, but also very poor domestic markets for the innovations. So Finland consumes a lot of energy. The energy consumption of Finns per capita is the second highest in EU and double the average of EU energy consumption. Of course, we live in a northern country where we need a lot of heating and lighting, but this doesn't explain it all. And the housing sector accounts for about 20% of final energy consumption. About 2/3 of that is power, and 1/3 of that is power, and 2/3 of that is heat. So I would expect that Finnish houses are very energy efficient, but that is not the case. If you look at the scale from A to G, the Finnish houses are on average F. So that's a very poor classification. And this is explained if you look at when the Finnish houses have been built, and bulk of the houses have been built in 70s and 60s before there were any regulations for energy efficiency. So there was a fast urbanization in the country, people moved from countryside to cities, and there was huge need for new apartments, new houses, and they were built very fast and with cheap costs, so they are not energy efficient, and this causes the problems we are facing now. I know that a lot of people in Finland would not be very happy for me saying this, but in my opinion, the energy efficiency in housing sector in Finland is mostly as implementing the EU policy where you can find the easy way out. We're not talking about things you are talking here. You are taking, I think, many steps forward from our policy if you are really implementing the things I just heard. Okay, but I will now go through the national policies we have for housing sector, energy efficiency. There are a lot of them. Then in the end, try to draw some conclusions from that. So of course, since we are EU country, there are a lot of EU regulations and energy efficiency directive, and a lot of this is the national implementation of EU policies, but it's already impossible to divide national policy from EU policy in that sense. So one of the main policies for energy efficiency in Finland in the housing sector is tax credit for domestic costs. So if you do energy efficiency improvements or renovations, you can get a tax relief in taxation for the work part of the renovation. And it's 45% of the work-related costs that can be relieved in taxation. And so if you look at the materials or other costs, they are exempted from the tax relief. So obviously the purpose of the tax relief is not only to increase energy efficiency, but also to increase the need for labor. This sounds very good, but actually they are, even the government is not expecting that this would cause a lot of improvements in energy efficiency other than heat pumps. There are quite, but for heat pumps installations in housing heating, there are quite positive visions for how this tax relief could work. Then another energy efficiency scheme in Finland is energy subsidy for households. And this subsidy is only for low-income households. And it's discretionary, which means that the government officials can decide whether to give the subsidy or not. And it changes every year for which kind of households it is given, for which kind of renovations is it given for. But basically it's given for energy efficiency improvements or renewable energy heating system installations. And the subsidy covers maximum of 25% of the costs. And same household can get both the tax relief I just mentioned, the 45% of the work-related costs and the 25% reduction of the costs. But since this is only for the very low-income families and households, the tax level they are paying is not very high, so the tax relief is not actually working for them, so this is why they have an extra subsidy. Then there are some energy efficiency agreements which are also implemented to improve the energy efficiency of the housing sector. And there is property and building sector energy efficiency agreement in place, and it has 2 action plans for housing and for commercial properties, their own action plans. And in the housing sector, it covers the rental properties. So it's rental property action plan, and it's aimed at companies and organizations that rent apartments for households. And the main action in energy efficiency is to promote energy service in rental properties. Then there is another also energy efficiency agreement in Finland, and it's called Höylä 3, and it's agreed between the Finnish government and the Finnish oil sector. And there are 2 aims at the agreement, and one is to improve the energy efficiency of oil heating, and the second one is to increase the renewable energy sources in heating of households. And this is more informational campaigning than anything else, so it's done by providing advisory services for households. Then this was also already discussed in Selina's presentation, but due to EU regulations, there are quite strict energy efficiency regulations for new buildings, and actually Finland has had this policy even before we were EU member state. So the first energy efficiency regulations in Finland took place in 1978 due to the oil crisis. So when I said that most of the houses are built in 60s and 70s, and then the first regulations came in place in 1978, it's quite clear that the regulations came a bit too late for our building stock. But after the late 70s, the houses actually have been built with quite good energy efficiency in mind, and it has been improved many times, and the latest regulations are from 2012, so from 2 years ago. And all new buildings have to be built according to the latest energy efficiency requirements. Then there is also another part. So this is what I just told you about, was about new buildings. And it's not very fast the rate that new buildings are being built in Finland, so the building stock renews itself very slowly. So there is also some policy for improving the current building stock, but this is actually the weakest part of the policy, and it should of course be the strongest one in order to really improve the energy efficiency. So, but what does the regulation say? It says that energy efficiency improvement has to be always taken into account when major overhauls are being made in the housing sector. But, however, the rate of major overhauls has not been increased in Finland, and the energy efficiency improvements that are not related to major overhauls are not obligatory. And also if the energy efficiency improvements only have to be made if they are cost efficient and also technically and functionally appropriate. So anyone can kind of say that, okay, this is not cost efficient or this is not technically or functionally appropriate. So this kind of, the regulation waters itself down, and not even the government is not expecting very much of this regulation since it's very watered down. It looks nice, but it's actually kind of nothing. So then you already mentioned a bit about energy audits. So energy audit determines buildings' energy class from A to G. And in Finland, they are introduced now gradually to all buildings. And by 2017, it's required for most building types. Only some historical sites are exempted from that. And already now, if you're selling your house and it has to have an energy audit, this building type already, then you have to show what is the energy class, what is the energy number of your house, and how does it impact your energy costs. This is also theoretically very good, but in practice it hasn't worked. So the consumers have not been driven by the energy efficiency class or energy class of the building when they are choosing which house to buy. So this is now under discussion this fall in Finland. How should we improve the calculations? How should we improve in how to use this when selling your properties? And Selinas, you were talking about maybe having the tax that you're paid. Tax that you pay for your property, if that could be adjusted for with the energy class, and this kind of discussion is actually now ongoing also in Finland. So then some conclusions. So as you heard, we have multiple energy efficiency policy instruments in place for the building sector or the housing sector. And the main solutions are for new buildings, the regulations for new buildings, improving the oil heating efficiency, and increasing the amount of heat pumps in heating. So this is all very good, and this should all be in place, but we are kind of lacking now regulations for the current building stock and insulation and improving the energy efficiency of that. Also, as I mentioned in the beginning, Finland is one of the leading countries in clean tech innovations, so if we could really get this energy efficiency improvements increased in Finland, then we would really improve our possibilities to create a domestic market for these services and technologies, and then of course improve our chances of exporting those innovations to global and EU markets. What is happening now is that energy policy is actually the #1 topic in Finnish media and in the political discussions at the moment. And it's of course partly due to the political situation, but also largely due to the fact that we have parliamentary elections coming up next April. And the discussion is very much heating at the moment, and so it's very good to find knowledge from other countries and hear what the discussion is in other EU countries in specific to learn for our national discussions. Thank you.
Mums ir kāds 5 minūtes viešņai no Somijas uzdot tūlītējs jautājums, ja tādi ir pāris jautājumiem un atbildēm vēl ir iespēja. Lūdzu, nekautrējieties, paceliet roku, ja ir un. Ja nav, tad man ir viens jautājums, labi. Mirklīti būs mikrofons vajadzīgs, jo, lai tulku varētu pārtulkot.
Labdien! Ļoti īsi par to, kā tiks realizēta energoefektivitātes direktīva Somijā siltumapgādes uzņēmumos.
Thank you. Very good and very current question, and it's already there. It's already implemented for most parts. So we are not going to have huge changes to the Finnish system. If you read the energy efficiency agreement, there is always placeholder in the end that's watering kind of each part down, which is saying, or if the country can show energy efficiency improvements in other way. And this is always what Finland is kind of doing. And the Article 5 you were talking about, which is the energy efficiency improvements in the central government-owned building stock. It's actually a bit pity that in Finland the central government doesn't own that many buildings. It's a few buildings that are actually under that regulation, which we are implementing, but it doesn't kind of make any changes to the energy efficiency since the number of the building stock is such small.
Paldies, thank you. Ir vēl iespēja pajautāt, vai tad man ir viens jautājums, vai un cik lielā mērā Somijā komercbankas ir iesaistītas visā energoefektivitātes pasākumu finansēšanā, arī varbūt koncentrētā veidā?
Well, again, I have to say that's not very well. If you look at the housing sector, then we're now trying to work with Finnish commercial banks in order to get for them some incentives to give households lower loans with lower costs, so some governmental incentives for banks. But also you were discussing about ESCO models, and in ESCO models it's a lot of private companies, also private finance in some cases. So it depends on if the finance is coming from public finance or from private banks. But unfortunately the ESCO service model has not been taken or has not started very well in Finland. There are only 6 companies providing the solutions or selling ESCO services, and only actually 2 of them have finished projects, and only 1 of them has finished multiple projects. So it's very early stage still with ESCO projects in Finland.